We are into the second hour of our special roundtable discussion this Friday night, previewing the major events that are going to be taking place here in Johannesburg this weekend at the G20 World Leaders Summit. I'm Simon Marks.
And I'm Ziyanda Ngobo, and as we enter into this second hour, we'll be reflecting on how African countries, in particular in the Caribbean, Simon, are still facing challenges that limit the impact of digital public infrastructure, and these are systems that enable secure and seamless interaction between people, businesses and governments.
And throughout South Africa's G20 presidency, President Ramaphosa has advanced global discussions on digital transformation, including the risks and the opportunities presented by artificial intelligence.
So here's Malungelo Boy to explain why this has become ever so urgent.
This is one of Netcare's health facilities, the largest private healthcare provider in South Africa. From advanced electronic medical records to the use of algorithms that predict patients' risk for heart failure, respiratory inability or infection, digitalization is already transforming patient care.
We do all of our clinical notes on the iPads. We've got all of your blood results, ECGs, chest x-rays. All of our consultations are done through the iPad, medication, the whole lot. And what's also part of the aspect that we do is that the nursing heart rates, blood pressures, those type of things that we in the past used to write down on a piece of paper, you have to go in, find it, go to the next patient. All that stuff is being piped in real time into our electronic medical record. So what we found is that this has freed up our nurses to spend time on the stuff that's important, which is the patients.
And the benefits are tangible.
This algorithm that we've worked on tries to identify patients who are in the process of getting sick before the doctor would clinically be able to identify this. The thought that we have is that this algorithm is listening to the patient all the time. You know, doctors and nurses, they're there, but they can't watch every second of every moment.
Under its G20 presidency, South Africa is pushing for a greater focus on digital public infrastructure and AI to ensure technology benefits people everywhere, not just in wealthy nations. At Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, one of the largest in the world, government is embarking on a massive digital overhaul, digitizing 800 million patient records across 37 public health facilities in Gauteng. Already, more than 100 people have been employed to carry out this work over the next 3 years.
History has told us that these were the challenges that we had, silos or standalone systems, whereby Para will have his own X-ray machine, X-ray system, which is PACS, and Charlotte will also have their own. And when the patient goes to Para, they need to do MRI X-rays, then they'll repeat the same thing if they go to Charlotte because they don't have a history of the patient. So how do we trace that part? Our health information system will have those records, tracking using the patient master index number that I alluded to, then you'll be able to see the x-rays or the history of the patient. Going back to the digitization project that we're doing, the scanning the hard copies of the files that we have, those files will be available into the system where we are in the process of integrating it to the core system, which is the health information system.
But like everywhere else, going digital requires massive investment in infrastructure.
It's a huge undertaking, you know, the devices with which you interface with the patient, the support for those devices, the background computer systems and databases that need to be on there, the work that it takes to get all of your processes digitized.
The World Bank warns that poor connectivity and lack of skilled talent still threatens Africa's ability to build inclusive digital systems. And yet, without this infrastructure, digitalization risks deepening inequality rather than solving it.
We need a stable infrastructure that provides a good speed with proper security, instant reporting because of, I'll give an example, one of the most critical systems that are highly dependent on the connectivity is your radiology system. You're sending a lot of images, big data, and remember that we have doctors that they need to view those reports and images when the patients are there. So radiologists, when they report immediately, then the viewing doctor on the other side, they need to have access to the report of the patient. So we need a stable infrastructure that will talk to it to say that the information is available.
For the government, the end goal is a single digital identity across the health system, from birth to old age, ensuring continuity of care. And it's not just in health. In classrooms like in Diepsloot Primary School, learners as young as 6 are being introduced to coding and robotics, skills that prepare them for the jobs of the future.
Here with my learners, we managed to create something which is a tractor. Yeah. This tractor belongs to us at the school, but it was built by the learners, these learners as you see them. The reason why they created this or they designed this is because at our school we've got garden. So sometimes it's become difficult for us to pour the vegetable with our own hands. So they, in their back mind, they thought maybe if we can create a tractor that can walk and plow the plant at the garden, then we can have more vegetable for our school.
For Africa and the Global South, the stakes are high. Digital public infrastructure and fair artificial intelligence are not luxuries, but lifelines for inclusive growth.
In the past, some of us who were not exposed to technology, computers, met them for the first time at university or so, but now as young as 5-6 years, we are already exposing our learners to this, and this put them at a better position to compete even at global level. We can see future scientists, future IT specialists from the exposure that we are giving our children.
The challenge for world leaders now is whether they will ensure a digital future that connects us all or risk leaving millions further behind. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Malungelo Bui in Johannesburg.
A very important conversation being kickstarted by Malungelo Boy about digital transformation. And to join us in studio to talk more about this, Simon, is Dr. Alex van der Heever. You are the Chair of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at the University of Witwatersrand. Thank you for your time. And I think, you know, just listening to what Malungelo Boy was telling us there, he was talking about Chris Baragwanath Hospital, I couldn't help but think of Tembisa Hospital. And why is it so difficult to have digital technology entering our public infrastructure? Because it would make things a whole lot easier. We wouldn't lose information, but also greater integration means greater efficiency.
Yeah, so the digital transformation in healthcare is absolutely crucial to improving efficiencies. It's in patient administration, so that's where digital record keeping, and the administration of patients, dispensing of medicines, etc., but also in treatment and a whole range of other administrative functions that are currently paper-driven, analog, work very poorly and disappear into the ether. The problem with getting these systems in properly has been corruption, and that they are susceptible to essentially bad actors who are entering into the IT space. And the public sector doesn't appear to be able to absorb these systems in a systematic way so that they can be deployed. So once you've got systematic corruption at bay, you have to solve the governance problems in the public health system to be able to allow the digital technology and the new structures, the new technology to efficiently enter the system and to be appropriately deployed.
Mm.
And you were talking there about what's taking place in South Africa, but these are problems that are shared by a large number of G20 members that are gathering here in Johannesburg for this big weekend ahead, all of whom are facing the same crossroads because much of this technology is still so new.
Well, the technology exists. The main issue or the main problem is really how to efficiently absorb it into systems. They do have to be designed, they do have to be sensitive to the context. In many cases, they're related to very specific business processes that can be that need to be designed, often from analog systems, and then implemented. And those are the existing analog systems, not ones in the United States. So the issue is you often evolve these in context, and if you've got poor governance even running those systems, you often struggle to develop the business processes in a way that is that allows for the absorption of this technology in an efficient manner.
Dr. van der Heever, it seems like technology is running faster than the systems that are meant to be transformed actually are. What's the nexus point between, artificial intelligence, which is already here, adjusting, curricula in schools to actually prepare, citizens, students for the future, but also at the same time being able to move with the times, as you've said, and dealing with those governance issues, because it seems like all of these things are going to collide and something's going to get left behind.
Yeah, so artificial intelligence is a double-edged sword because in terms of education, in relation to education, the problem is that it substitutes for learning and it diminishes the cognitive load involved in learning. Much of learning requires you to go through difficult things and struggle with content, and AI softens all of that. And so there's that problem from an educational perspective. Yeah. The other side is that it actually makes complex tasks a lot simpler, and you can allow these to be introduced in interfaces in many systems that can make decision-making faster, better. It can scrutinize, hugely improve accountability systems, your procurement systems, large evaluations of bid evaluation committee documentation and so on at a central level to identify where there's fraud. If you've digitized most of your procurement systems, your ability to deploy AI becomes much greater. But in medicine and treatment and diagnosis, it's also incredibly important. So yes, it can improve productivity, but it's not necessarily being absorbed smoothly and neatly. People are learning how to adjust to this, but it will be a critical thing going forward into the future.
And can I ask you what your view is about the fact that the G20 does not appear to be discussing in any particular detail the fact that the AI industry is still largely unregulated? Is that a miss this weekend?
I would say it is. The issue is that I think it's moving much faster than decision makers in governments. And they can't themselves get their head around what's going on. And many of the people who are developing these systems are themselves actually learning what their potential is and their risks are. And in some cases, their financial incentives mean they have less interest in solving those problems. And the people who are most likely to be victims are so far behind in actually being able to address these. So we do actually need a concentrated effort of understanding what's going on and understanding the points of regulation that go in, because you're not necessarily going to regulate all aspects, but you want to regulate key aspects of the system so it doesn't become poisonous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in some regards, it's not dissimilar from the conversation about the lack of regulation in the social media sphere. I mean, this appears to be something that governments are hesitant to take on, and also that elected lawmakers, even in Washington, D.C., have no real understanding of what this technology can do or where it can take the world.
Yeah, so when you combine AI with social media, you have the ability to hack democracies, and I think that is the key problem that we have. Now, the democracies that are being hacked are not just in developing and emerging countries, they're in countries that are highly dependent on an informed population. And if you can suddenly cocoon them using a combination of AI plus social media, you can prevent people from even seeing a proper debate about anything. And so you can alter the whole nature of a democratic process so it ceases to function effectively.
So do you see anything taking place this weekend that is going to have a positive impact on reining some of this stuff in, or is it just a conversation that's going to be left for another day?
I think it is being left for another day, and I think that when with the G20 goes to the United States, it's going to disappear even further into the ether. So, but it's probably a debate that's going to emerge very powerfully in Europe because they're being affected by it. They're very much being targeted, as is the UK and Australia and various other countries, but also here. And that cocooning effect is very serious, And as I said, in combining it with AI, it means you dramatically increase the speed with which misinformation is used to actually, as I said, cocoon people into polarized groupings that are the specific target of people who want to undermine democratic processes, as I say, hack them, so that they don't work, because they depend on some kind of balanced information transfer. But once you can get people to not see that side of the story, to get addicted to this side of the story, suddenly the system doesn't work anymore.
Canada has just arrived.
Prime Minister Mark Carney apparently has just landed. We don't yet have visuals from the airport, but I think we'll get them fairly soon. And as soon as we do, you'll be seeing those. But Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada now in the house for this G20 summit.
Yep, absolutely. I want to pick up on the point about cocooning, because then it means that artificial intelligence could also give credence to the rise in populist politics. And so how do these decision makers who will be at the G20 summit, or well, you've said it's a missed opportunity, how do you then arrest such a situation if the conversation isn't even on the table?
I think it's a difficult, so I think part of the reason is it's difficult and technically, and it also is something that is evolving very fast. So for instance, the use of AI to continuously adapt algorithms means you have learning algorithms that are there to basically defend them against any countermeasures that you might introduce. So these can become, it actually improves the productivity of hacking information. And it does mean we have to think very carefully about how electoral politics operates in the future under these conditions.
Especially in a world where tech billionaires, Simon Marks, you know, in the US, tech billionaires seem to have a large influence in elections if the re-election of Donald Trump is anything to go by. And we might even be seeing something similar on the African continent and even here in South Africa, where tech billionaires seem to influence the way elections come out. And this then speaks to what you're talking about then, about how these technologies, it's not easy to arrest them.
I mean, just to be clear about the gravity of what you are suggesting, I mean, this is in many ways the nightmare scenario, that this conversation can be taking place all weekend about all the issues that are on the table, sustainability, solidarity, equality, debt, poverty, gender-based violence, all of those vitally important issues to the rest of the world. But you, I mean, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you are clearly concerned that there is a massive issue overshadowing all of this that simply is not getting the attention that it deserves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the risk is essentially that it is much easier now to divert people's attention away from the issues that matter to them to dealing with conspiracy theories and distractions. You saw this evolving and was very much utilized during the COVID period. So these conspiracy theories are actually a way of distracting people. Migration, xenophobia, these are distracting things. Cultural wars are all about distracting people from the issues that actually really matter to them. They make people very angry about stuff that really doesn't matter to them. And then the stuff that does matter to them is slowly taken away. And so who are the people that are benefiting? They're very often the people who are controlling how these structures invade the democratic process. That's the danger. And the danger is once your huge income inequalities and wealth inequalities have this feedback effect on the nature of democracy, you're in trouble.
So what should they be doing this weekend? What would an action plan, if you were designing a G20 action plan on this, given the obstacles and the challenges that you've laid out, what should they be doing?
So they should be looking at, first of all, an understanding of what is happening to democratic processes, noting that some countries aren't democratic. And so how do you have a conversation with them? But if you're looking at countries that are worried about losing what is actually really important, it might mean that you actually have to have these discussions on a multilateral basis with the people that are really invested in genuine democratic process. It's extremely dangerous, but it also means that even in authoritarian societies, the people are completely made inert.
Well, we are enormously grateful to you for bringing all of that to our attention and to the attention of our viewers. Dr. Alex van der Heever, the chairperson of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits University. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate your time. Now, entrepreneurs in South Africa's oldest and largest township, Soweto, are gearing up to tap into whatever opportunities the G20 Global Leaders Summit may bring them over this weekend.
And local tourism is in for a moment to shine. And our Malungelo boy's been very busy because he's also got that story for us.
Townships like Soweto are vibrant hubs of entrepreneurship, home to thousands of small and medium-sized businesses. Together, this informal economy is estimated to be worth around 900 billion rand. For Homotse Boy, who runs Soweto Tours, this is a golden moment. He started his company in 2012, inspired by the buzz that followed the 2010 FIFA World Cup.
My excitement around the G20 is similar to how the euphoria came around the 2010. Not necessarily because we're hosting soccer teams, but we're hosting the world's politicians. And when you host the world's politicians, the country is literally put on blast. You are out there and everywhere. But so this is going to showcase Soweto, it's going to showcase Johannesburg, it's going to showcase our country and show people what it is that we have. The last time people saw our country under a microscope was during 2010. The G20 is also going to allow tourism businesses to be showcased and to show how safe South Africa is. Because 2010 is what, 15 years ago from now? How many things have changed? How has the narrative been done? Guys who were 10 years old in 2010 are now 25 and can travel and be able to engage and see that media exposure that South Africa will be getting. So I think it's a very great thing for our country.
Boe hopes visitors attending the G20 will take time to explore the township's unique character and adventure offering.
In no other township can you bungee jump, quad bike, paintball. So this is the only township you have an adventure center. 2, which other township has a 4-star hotel? No other township has it. Which other township has 2 Nobel Prize winners? No other township has that. Which township started the 1976 uprising? They say when Soweto sneezes, the whole country catches the flu. So this is the one place where literally everything starts.
Boe employs over 20 young people, including Koketso Hosimang and Itumeleng Richikana, who guide tourists through Soweto's landmarks, like the Hector Peterson Memorial, which honors the 12-year-old student killed during the 1976 Soweto uprising.
The job being a tourist guide has brought a lot of opportunities towards. Now I've met a lot of people that are inviting me to different countries, just to visit them, just to show me around their place, because I've taken them around my home.
Kagiso Moche drives a tuk-tuk around Soweto, giving visitors an authentic and street-level view of the township.
Are you hoping that they'll use this tuk-tuk?
More than excited for them to be coming inside the tuk-tuk. Why? It's mainly because of I want to showcase what we do right here. It would be a great pleasure, like we are going to be hosting the G20, for them to be hopping inside and hopping off. It would be a great experience because that's where they're going to get a clear, vivid picture about the history of Soweto and where it actually originates.
Yeah.
Not only the main attractions, but deeper Soweto. I get inside the Dube hostel. Yes, it was the former male hostel before. Yes, and then we depart from there and get into the shopping centers, A2 shopping center.
In nearby Kliptown, the Soweto Hotel is also preparing for an influx of guests. It's part of a network of establishments offering more than 700 beds across the township, including the same suite where King Charles, then Prince Charles, stayed in 2011.
COVID-19 was rough, and tourism was the hardest hit industry. And a lot of our businesses within tourism hasn't recovered yet. And we are one of those. We haven't recovered yet. So every day it's a challenge. We've had to really relook at how we do business. We've had to multitask. Like me, as I sit here, I also cook. You have to cook. In order for you to try and cut costs. So an event like this, a summit like this, will bring much needed relief, financial relief for every single one of the players within the tourism industry.
Government says the G20 has already boosted arrivals since business meetings began in August.
So we have really benefited. We've seen in August month alone that we've received over 30% more visitors than the previous year. So we will do a complete assessment after the Leaders Summit, but there's a big benefit for tourism.
For now, Soweto's entrepreneurs are ready, hoping the G20 brings not just global leaders, but lasting local benefits. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Malungelo Bui in Soweto.
Let's take you back to the airport. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, has now landed in Johannesburg, as we reported a few minutes ago, and the door of that aircraft will hopefully open pretty quickly. And hopefully, pretty quickly, Mark Carney will wander down those stairs to join the other world leaders who have already arrived here in Johannesburg for the weekend's events. Mark Carney, of course, brings an astonishing degree of expertise to the conversation, particularly with regard to finance, economics and business, because remember that before he was Prime Minister of Canada, he was the Governor of the Bank of England. He is a highly regarded economist and specialist in terms of financing, and that is of course one of the reasons why he was under quite extraordinary circumstances in Canada able to parlay that into a political career as Justin Trudeau's time at the helm in Ottawa came to an end. So Mark Carney, who has had a terribly difficult time of it with his neighbor to the south, President Donald Trump, a trade war between the two countries that at times has veered almost completely out of control. President Trump, in various fits of pique, peremptorily terminating all discussions with Canada at one point because the American president, and I am not making this up, didn't like a 30-second television ad that the provincial government of Ontario, not even the national government led by Mark Carney, but the provincial government of Ontario had booked on American television stations close to the border with Ontario, reminding Americans of the amount of reliance that they have on products and power from Canada, because President Trump often diminishing two-way trade between Canada and the United States, saying we don't need very much from Canada. Well, the reality is that the provincial premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, understands that were he to switch power exports to the United States off, he would be turning the lights off in Michigan, Minnesota, and substantial parts of Manhattan, New York City itself. And so that 30-second television spot was designed to encourage Americans to oppose President Trump's tariff policies. President Trump absolutely was infuriated by it, and as a result, completely terminated conversations about trade with Mark Carney. So Mark Carney will be coming to a G20. I actually think, I suspect, perhaps quite relieved that Donald Trump won't be here, although he may have coveted an opportunity to sit down and at least see if he could repair the trading relationship in some fashion across the US border with Canada. Remember that Donald Trump spent much of the last year while he was campaigning for office saying that he believed that Canada needed to become America's 51st state, something that Canadians resolutely oppose. We've heard less of that rhetoric lately, but there's absolutely no question that he is still punishing Canada, and that trading relationship has still got some very substantial problems as we wait there for Mark Carney to emerge from that plane and join the G20 party.
Simon Marks, you've got all the information right at your fingertips, and we're going to bring in Dr. Lebogang Bego. She's still with us, a political economist. And let's pick up on the point that Simon has made about these trade wars that Donald Trump has been, engaging in, and just how much they've bombed out. And I want us, to put that in the context of, this geopolitical fragmentation, but also the rise of China and other countries, and how we all need to be imagining or reimagining the architecture, whether it's on the security front, whether we're talking about technology. It's about how we reorganize, and in particular this moment for Africa, because this G20 being held in our country is carrying the hopes of the continent.
So we were trying very hard not to center the United States, but just to say this part, the tariffs have had a huge impact, as we're aware, on domestic prices in the United States. So they've actually been a quiet but very definitive walking back on many of those. I think there have been food increases and product increases of up to 40% in the U.S., and U.S. consumers are not impressed by this. This also shows again that this isolationism is not particularly useful, particularly because several regions and several countries, we now know that China is the biggest, our biggest car supplier and source is now China. And Korea being a close second. I myself am the proud owner of a Hyundai, and many people, I think, are moving differently. This also shows that this decentralizing of the industrialization model that the U.S. has often used, which is to dump a lot of their products, their Ford cars, their particular brand, and their particular lifestyle on the rest of the world, is also becoming decentered. Now, you ask also about digitalization and what that potentially means. There are means of production. So the other concern is, of course, joblessness. What is a job? What does that actually mean? If factory workers are going to become obsolete, and particular key industries are going to become obsolete, we need to rethink and reimagine what the workspace looks like. Now, for a continent like Africa, where 60 to 80% of the continent, of the work-age workforce is not in formal employment, and I use that word very, very cautiously, because, of course, just because a person hasn't got a 9-to-5 job doesn't mean that they don't have an occupation, whether it's a hustle, whether it is some kind of self-employment.
Dr. Peka, I just do need to jump in there, because I believe President Cyril Ramaphosa is hosting a reception dinner on the topic of Africa, hosting African heads of state this evening for a dinner. And so let's take you live to those proceedings. It's an important moment for the continent, as we've been discussing. Let's go there live.
Moving forward to invest across our various countries on the continent. We're particularly pleased that we should have this opportunity of meeting together as we are tonight, so that we can, as African countries, and indeed as a representative of the Caribbean, which is the 6th region of our continent, should share some perspectives on the process that has been underway for a year under the G20 process. When we were honored to become the president of the G20, we used the G20 platform to promote the Africa 2063 agenda. We have sought to position Africa as a vital partner in advancing equitable development. We have advanced priorities such as disaster resilience, debt sustainability, finance for just energy transitions, and harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth. We established an Africa expert panel to reinforce Africa's voice on debt sustainability, on the cost of capital, and financing for productive investment. We are encouraged by the Ministerial Declaration on Debt Sustainability, which outlines a clear acknowledgement of the growing debt burden on African countries and provides a basis for concrete action. We must work together to ensure that the commitments in this declaration, including to strengthen implementation of the common framework and extend support to countries facing liquidity challenges, are translated into meaningful action. To reflect our support for a stronger voice for borrowing countries in the global debt architecture, we have offered to host the inaugural meeting of the Borrowers Platform in South Africa next year in order to give impetus to the initiative and ensure that it is led from Africa. This follows one of the recommendations from the expert panel, which the lead expert in the form of our former Minister of Finance, Trevor Manuel, will speak to a little later. We have secured agreement on a G20 Africa engagement framework, which will enable a continued focus on the G20 finance track, on the issues that matter most to Africa over the next 5 years. By advocating for Africa's interests globally, we have sought to ensure that the continent's voice is heard on climate change, on the issue of debt, on trade and humanitarian assistance. Fair trade, inclusive prosperity, reformed global governance and multilateralism are fundamental to our vision for a more equal world. Yesterday, we concluded a G20 Social Summit, welcoming civil society organizations, think tanks, and academia to strengthen partnerships around the challenges that our people experience and confront. The outcomes of the Social Summit confirm the relevance and the value of the priorities of our G20 presidency. As African countries, we therefore need to use the G20 to advance our agenda. South Africa correctly felt that we need to put the interests of our continent on the global platform. By harnessing our collective strengths, we do believe that we can continue to highlight the many issues that the African continent wants the world to address. We are convinced that our beloved continent can overcome its challenges and become a leader in prosperity and development. South Africa's approach to its G20 presidency reflects our foreign policy principles, which are based on respect for multilateralism, respect for international law, peace, justice, equality, and respect for human rights. Nelson Mandela taught us that everyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve success through dedication and passion. It is us who must work together to make our continent prosperous, peaceful, democratic, united, and contribute to a just and equitable world. So tonight's session is an African session within the framework of the G20. We felt that as we go into the G20 Summit tomorrow, it's important for us as African countries to come together to share perspectives, to share ideas, and also to receive some important reports that we commissioned as South Africa to be shared and discussed with the G20 partners tomorrow. So I welcome you all, and I thank you for being present here. And tomorrow will be a very long day for all of us as we make our inputs and interventions. And as South Africa, we are hoping that we will have the Leaders' Declaration adopted, which will set a new agenda and a continuing agenda for the world, particularly the G20, which accounts for about 85% of the global GDP. The approach of Africa in all this, in our view, is important, and the views and perspectives that will be shared by Africa with the rest of the world are very key and important, and it was for this reason that we felt that those African countries that are attending this G20 should get together so that we can share without obviously impinging on the participation of other countries that are part of the G20. As we have dubbed this G20 an opportunity for Africa to highlight its key issues, and as South Africa have sought to do so, it was important that we should get together. So beyond this opening, we will then deal with some of the key G20 declaration, key highlights very briefly, which will be presented by Minister Lamola and our Director General Dengo, and thereafter we will get a report briefly on the expert panel, and thereafter we will adjourn for dinner and continue with some informal discussions. With those words, I welcome you all and thank you for being here. And I then would like to give the media the opportunity to go and rest, because they've been very busy the whole day. And usually by this time, they should be preparing to go to bed. So we give you the opportunity to then go and rest, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, media. Thank you.
Well, that was President Cyril Ramaphosa hosting the African heads of state for a reception dinner in Johannesburg, emphasizing the importance of this summit taking place on the African continent. Agenda 2063 firmly at the top of the agenda for the weekend. What does it mean for the continent? Simon, we are still here together with Dr. Miriam Altman as well as Dr. Lebogang Pheko. Thank you for your time. And I think let's start with you, Dr. Altman. When we look at the outcomes of this weekend, we've got the issues around debt. We know that at least half of low and middle income countries spend more than 10% of their tax revenue just on interest payments, for an example. We've got issues around climate funding. We've got the COP30 that's currently underway in Brazil, but the issues and the pledges that were made by developed nations, they've not actually come to fruition. So there are a lot of issues that need to be dealt with. Yes, this is not a binding gathering, but the resolve once everybody goes back home.
Well, I think it's important to remember that it's not a binding group.
Yeah.
That gives it a freedom to talk freely. The most important thing, some people say talk shop, but people need to talk. We need to connect in a world that is pulling apart. So there are a couple things I think that are going to come out of this event that are quite important. One is actually just a recommitment to the green agenda in this context. So even if it's a talk shop, A talk shop meaning people are, I know it's pejorative, that statement, but actually we do need to talk, we do need to reassert. These are important people, the business people, the governments, it's 85, as we know, it's 75%, 80% of the global economy. These are important groups who are restating their commitment. Restating a commitment to saying, look, we've got to get tariffs down, we've got to get trade moving, we've got to deal with supply chains. We can't continue this way. Now, it may be as America takes it over next year that it gets asserted a different way, but we need people talking openly in a group like this. The recommitment to thinking about social protection in a world where we've got rising inequality and really deep poverty is absolutely critical. In relation to the cost of capital story, and here's very much an Africa story, that commission, or the, I forget what it was called, the group that was, expert group, that was run by Trevor Manuel on the cost of capital is really critical. And that's going to be a big theme. Now, that's one of the big practical things coming out of this. The issue there is that the way that risk is assessed in Africa is different to the rest of the world. So you can have two countries that have the same credit rating, and an African country will be paying more for its credit. So the estimate is that South Africa may be paying more than 50 billion rand a year in interest payments than it would have if that had been calculated differently. The value across Africa may be to the tune of $4.2 billion a year. So that is probably one of the most practical things that's coming out of this thing.
But can I just press you on that? I mean, practical, and Dr. Peko, feel free to weigh in as well. Practical in what sense? In concrete terms, what action comes out of this summit relating to that is immune from being completely erased the second the United States takes the gavel?
Well, the thing to remember is that this body does not make decisions. This body doesn't have teeth by its design. It was put into place, as you know, to deal with global economic crises and to enable these countries to come together to look at strategies. There are other bodies that manage the various parts of it. But what you do is you're having leaders coming together who are firstly articulating the issue, because it wasn't being articulated this way. And even if it's another issue, capital adequacy ratios in multilateral development institutions have been on the agenda already, but there's a recommitment to dealing with that, which would enable them to be able to lend more. Right? So it's not a new issue, but you're recommitting, you're reminding that issue is there, and reasserting it, and then creating that pressure to make sure that the core institutions that are meant to be doing it will do that. That would be the benefit in a context where this may move over to the United States. The country that manages this, as you know, leads the agenda. There's no doubt that there's going to be a different agenda next year. Having said that, they've recommitted to these things. That means they care about them.
Dr. Peko, I want to talk a bit more about the African continent and food insecurity, because this is something that I think is one of the tangibles, perhaps, that could be implementable. It's an urgent issue that requires attention and hunger across the continent. I mean, what are the conversations that need to be happening that, as I've mentioned earlier with Dr. Altman, that as soon as the countries go back, at least on the continent, if we're talking Agenda 2063, there's lots of big plans about railways and ensuring that there's easier movement and the African Continental Free Trade Area. But I mean, these are all things that seem like big ideas, and we're not on track for Agenda 2063. But for issues like hunger, the ease of movement of goods, how do we deal with that better?
So, I mean, that's also aligned to some of the priorities around the SDGs, which are also part of the G20 agenda.
Only 18% implemented.
Indeed. Also part of the agenda around sustainable agriculture. And also the green transition, such as it is and isn't. So, and it's also part of the agenda around, well, people call it climate resilience. I mean, I call it more climate adaptability. So there's a whole interface around how food democracy, as I prefer to call it, food sovereignty, plays itself out. It's also linked to the whole role of global agricultural cartels. The EU-Africa dumping, that's been a feature of trade relations such as they are for the past few decades, and the huge surplus that finds its way to shelves, to market shelves and supermarket shelves here. A few things come to mind. The one is apiculture and the ways in which we need to think around a reconfiguration of our value chain appreciation around how food is produced, from the seeds, who owns the seeds, the intellectual property around them, because GMOs are also a huge part of driving intergenerational hunger, where artisanal farmers and small-scale farmers, African women primarily, cannot reproduce, are prohibited by law from reproducing their own seed. The second part of that is then, of course, how the climate is also affecting the things that we produce when we produce them. I don't know if I'm the only one who's noticed that mangoes, certain things taste very different, and that is, and they kind of germinate at different, very early in the year, and all of that. So we also have to rethink how this is going to how this is going to deal a blow to what I call heritage foods, heritage diets, the cost of those diets, where they're produced, especially where there's increasing climate displacement as well. People who are not going to, who already, urban to rural migration and vice versa. Climate migration is a huge thing. And that also links back to the work that's being done around urbanization, right? Because of the glut of people who are now essentially climate refugees. And because the climate refugees having to leave their sources of sustainability and so forth.
Can I ask you both briefly, just to wrap our conversation up? When you go into these summits, there's always an intensity of focus on the part of the media, particularly, about whether a declaration is going to be agreed, a formal communique is going to be issued. There's more interest in that this time, I think, as a result of the note that was sent by the US Embassy in Pretoria to Durko, saying, don't even think about issuing a summit and claiming it was consensus. In brief, Dr. Altman first, will we have a declaration on Sunday night? And is it important that there should be one?
Well, the first thing to know is that there often isn't one. It would be unusual if there was one. Having said that, I think the president is quite committed to making sure that there is one. I'm just saying that the norm is not that there isn't one, but I think we will have one. I think it matters that the U.S. isn't here in its full glory. Having said that, given the rules of the G20 and how it operates, there shouldn't be any reason why they didn't, because it doesn't require, there's no veto of any particular country.
Exactly.
That's not the point. So the U.S. decided not to come, so they're not here. So they chose not, there's no reason why they shouldn't.
They don't get to condition the outcome.
That's right.
Yeah. And Dr. Pecker,
well,
your view on it?
The empty chair cannot speak. Simple as that.
You've got to be in it to win it.
Yep, and that has been the theme of Cyber Marks. The empty chair can't speak. Dr. Miriam Altman, thank you for your time. Dr. Lebogang Pecker with us for the roundtable discussion. Simon Marks, we've got our work cut out for us over the next 48 hours. It's not unusual to not get a declaration.
Indeed, and it has been an absolute pleasure to be here tonight. It's a pleasure for me to be in South Africa. I began my day with Iman Repeti, and I'm ending it with Zianda Ngobo. How lucky am I? Thank you all so much for watching our special program, looking ahead to the G20 this weekend. Stay with Newzroom Afrika 405 for full wall-to-wall coverage of everything that is going to happen in Johannesburg over the next 48 hours, as it is, because it is going to impact, as we've been hearing from our superb panel of guests here tonight, the entire world.
Yep, and Masakekana is up next with a News at Prime. It's probably a special edition, all things G20, but for now, it's goodbye. Thank you for watching.